All right.
Are we live?
We are now.
All right, so welcome back to Cutler Cast. What is it, 76?
76.
Okay, 76, and we have a very special guest on, Tommy Vext, who just recently came to Las Vegas, and a figurehead in many, many different arenas.
Yeah, a talking head, a figurehead. Yeah.
Listen, man, we're happy to have you on, and thanks for coming out today. I know you guys got to catch up a little bit, and we were just kind of briefly talking about things, but you've been so apparent in a lot of media and everything else, and everyone appreciates your work so much. I want to get into kind of a little bit deeper and learn a little more about your background. I know there's a lot of stories from the sounds of it, and
we got stories. I mean, you live long enough and you got some stories to tell.
We were just talking about, I was witnessing, through social media, and it's crazy how that's kind of become the thing now. One of your tours that you did, a couple of years ago, and you were talking about being nervous, and I'm like, I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, it still happens, I mean, in that particular situation was in 2017, I wound up filling in for Five Finger Death Punch's singer, so he could go. He was having some substance abuse problems, and obviously widely publicized. So he went and did what he needed to do, and he took care of himself. And by the grace of God,
was that Ivan or
and he's 5 years sober now. Yeah, and it's so I mean, I commend them for doing the opposite of what most people in the music industry do. Is usually they just keep pushing. They're just go up and make the money, and then, people never get time to recover. And so, I got put in a position where they asked me to fill in, and it was terrifying. And I'd been in, punk bands and metal bands and thrash bands and I've been playing shows since I was 14 at CBGB's in New York. But it's a little bit different, sorry. I never used a microphone before. It's a little bit different when it's, you walk on stage in Vienna and there's 180,000 people and you're like, holy.
Have you ever done a big show like that until that point?
That was the biggest thing that ever happened, right? And I did with my former band, Soundwave Festival in Australia. But even at the stage we were at, Incubus was headlining. We were on the metal stage, probably 6,000, 7,000 people maybe. So this is beyond.
So you went from small to just as big as it gets.
Yeah, just like that. And so, and I was we were talking about Lincoln Park before this, and after one of the shows, we went on right before Lincoln Park in Spain, and I was just in this kind of weird state of shock because on one hand, my friend, I'm worried that he's going to be okay, and then I'm, a perfectionist, and I'm like, am I doing a good job?
Mm-hmm.
And what am I doing here? And is this really happening? Right. I was 11 years sober at the time. Oh no, I was 9 years sober at the time when that happened, when all that was going down. And it was just very surreal. And I'm in the airport, the private airport in Spain. And Chester Bennington's like, hey man, you okay? I was like, I was like, oh my God, don't,
So you mentioned sober, so you have nothing to offset. Is that what you're saying? Some people would numb it with something, right? Have a shot or whatever, right?
Yeah, for me, I think some people they'll do a shot or they'll smoke weed or after the show they'll take it down a notch. And so it's just it's raw nerves and this surreal experience of, for my entire life since I was 15 years old, I was I want to, I saw Pantera and I was like, I'm going to do that, and then I saw Metallica and I saw Korn and I was like, I need to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, and I'm like, oh, and then it's happening 20 something years later. And I'm like,
sounds like the body.
So what's going through my head right now is the first time you went and performed in front of hundreds of thousands of people. What did you do backstage before your very first time you did it?
I did. Oh, so, the universe was conspiring in my favor that day. And I walked backstage when I got I woke up that morning and I was traveling with the tour, just kind of being a support system until a decision was made that I had to switch. And so I was not psychologically prepared for that to happen. And I ran into my buddy in Steel Panther. And so I used to be the security guard at the Key Club when Steel Panther played. And I've known him forever. And he's also sober. And I was like, bro, I'm freaking out. He's like, bro, what are you even doing here? I was like, bro, I'm singing tonight. He's like, with who? I was like, I'm going on after you. He's like, he knew exactly what that meant. He was like, oh my God. I was like, yeah. I was like, he's like, we need to have a meeting. I was like, yes. So they got all the other sober guys that were backstage, and we ran in a room, and like everybody prayed for me, and I was like, oh my God, if this is what I'm supposed to do, like help me, please give me, and one of the prayers I always do before I go on stage from pretty much there on out is, please help me to make this not about me. And let me say the thing that needs to be said for the one person to hear.
It's pretty selfless, actually,
Very powerful, too.
Yeah.
Well, it's the
message, huh?
Yeah, I survived a lot of things. Like, I got murdered. And so I said to God, even when I was, dying, I was like, please not today. And so we can get into all that. But so it's like, I'm on borrowed time, like it's, I don't know. Sometimes I tell these stories and I'm like, I can't believe this even happened to me. Right. Cause
it brings you back. Right.
Yeah. Cause I mean, it's like the first time, you got on stage versus like the first time you arrived, right? Like Jay Cutler has arrived. Yeah. And those moments of where that kid that walked in the gym the first day becomes a world champion, and like the meter, right? Like when I met you at Gold's a couple years ago, it was the same thing that happened when I saw Chester Bennington. I was like, oh, like
I was surprised. I was actually
I got super stupid.
I was surprised that you actually kind of knew, because I didn't know like you were really in deep with the fitness thing. And I mean, obviously you worked out, right? But I was obese.
I
thought the same thing though. I'm like, how's this guy know who I am? Because obviously you were a figurehead also.
Well, no, I mean, to me, like what bodybuilding and fitness represented to me was something untangible always, right? So when I was a kid, I was fat, I was awkward, I got abused, I was angry, so I fit right into the music stuff. But then, I got into drugs and alcohol at an early age. Like I started drinking and using at 12. And so by the time I was 20, I was already like full blown using. And then I got fat. I lost a bunch of weight from doing drugs. Then I stopped doing those drugs. And then I just drank and ate bad food. And then I got really, really fat. And, I was like a fat construction worker. And, I looked in the mirror. I still was playing shows. And I remember my girlfriend took pictures of me at a show that we did at the Limelight in New York City. And I was like disgusted with myself.
You saw the pictures.
And I was out of breath. And I was like, I couldn't play. And I was just like, never again.
How do you get introduced to like that side that young? I mean, you're talking about drinking at 12. Like, how do you get a hold of, like, what did you have an influence? Like, did you have a family member or like?
No, I mean, so there was a lot of things that contributed to this. I was adopted. My twin brother and I were abandoned by our birth mother. And then my parents that adopted me were very, well-meaning Christian people. My dad was a Vietnam veteran with very severe PTSD. He had been blown up. He got hit by a mortar, so he took shrapnel, and then he had been shot 3 times in a firefight. And so he eventually was, he got sent home, and he served his time. But he went to the bottle, and then he married my mother, and my mother was like, you have to get sober. And then he got sober. So my dad was sober for a long time, for almost the first 13 years of my life. And my brother was, by the time he was 10, he started going into mental institutions, right? So he was really doing bizarre, like scary things, like lighting fires. We were like, we were like playing with matches and burning things.
And where is this happening?
This is in Brooklyn.
Okay.
In Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
And then, it would be like, my friends would be like, oh, your brother like killed a dog, or like, like what? And he always had like two personalities. He would act one way, like around my friends and everything outside, but then in the house, he was like kind of like very sadistic. And so he wound up assaulting my mother multiple times, assaulting me, assaulting my sister while my father was working 2 or 3 jobs. And then me and my brother would fight because I was protecting my mom, and like then my dad would be mad at me. And it basically broke the house apart. And while my brother was institutionalized, my father had one drink, and that was it. And within about a year, my mom had to take my sister and leave. And my brother got out of did like 6 months straight in the last institution. And that was it. And the family was fractured. And so it didn't really, I was always an A student. I always, even though I was weird and awkward. And then I think I lost my dad, and I lost respect for him. And then I just started hanging out in the street. And it was, and the household became an unsafe place. And being out there in a group of guys was safer than being alone in that scenario. Mm-hmm. And so I got mixed up in a lot of dumb stuff, and I think that happens to a lot. I think, there's not enough conversation about the dangers of fatherless homes, and boys need a male role models, And even in my adult life, like when I wound up getting sober, I reformatted my father figures with a sponsor, right? And I gravitate towards people of excellence because I'm a poser, right? I want to be that, So when I have like, if I have real estate questions, I hit up Uncle Jack, and if I have, like legal trouble, I'll call Erwin, and I just got all these guys that I was blessed that came around me when I was 27, and were like, hey, we're not going to, and I was homeless. I was a homeless drug addict, and they were like, we're not going to quit on you. And no one had ever not quit on me before. So, the absence of that male role model led me to, to all kinds of things, selling drugs, messing with the wrong people, getting involved in violence, being a victim of violence. I'd been, stabbed, robbed at gunpoint. I've been out in shootouts, like in bars. Not that I wasn't firing, but where I was in these places where these things happened, and it was, until I got sober and then also went to therapy. I think about 2 years into sobriety, it was like going to therapy and talking about this stuff, and then having it explained back to me that this is not normal, right? We know as children what we experience, we normalize. And so, I went into the world as a man in my 20s with the emotional capacity of like probably a 14 or 15-year-old. And I think a lot of people who start drinking and using at a young age, it kind of halts our emotional development.
Yeah, it basically, you were trapped in that space for such a long time. You really didn't face reality, right? Mm-hmm. What?
Yeah, and then also your perception of reality is like...
It's totally out of proportion, right?
It's hard to take... you need... The thing about masculinity is the masculine is the balance that demands personal accountability, right? Like you can't be that without personal accountability to yourself, right? You can't become what you've accomplished. You can't do what I've accomplished without personal accountability. And what happens is that that's taught. So a young man who's lost with a lot of energy and wants to do a lot of things, if they don't understand that it's completely on them to create discipline, right? And also all the other attributes to forgive and to have kindness. These are the things that happen for a man. When you're a boy, you're spiteful. It's like Goonies, the kid in the well.
Yeah,
He's like, this is my wish and it didn't come true. And he's like, no, I'm taking everything. Yeah. And there are men in their adult lives who are still operating in this, in a childish state of scarcity because they weren't taught, right? There was no example. And so a lot of the things that I experienced by the time I was getting sober, I was a poor me guy, right? Poor me a drink. And so, it wasn't until I finally hit rock bottom, and it took me losing a child. It took me, becoming homeless. It took me a couple ODs. I didn't get the memo the first time, and then it hit, and then it hit. So I had some success. I had signed some record deals. I traveled all over the world. I thought that if I left Brooklyn that I was going to be okay, because I blamed my surroundings, because I didn't blame myself. I took myself with me, and then it never lasts that long. You can go to a certain limit on self-propulsion, especially when you're younger, but you can't maintain that forever. Human beings are not meant to just be solitary animals. You can't do everything alone. And some people try to, and then they end up alone. And then some people end up 80 years old and they're like alone because they didn't want to pack into the stream of life. So those are some of the major things to take away. And like I almost got killed when I was a kid. It did not wake me up. It really wasn't until I loved something more than myself, which was my son, and then losing that. It was so devastating because I hadn't felt real love for anything, or you know what I mean? And it made me hit rock bottom, and then it put me in a position for the narrative to change. So
where did you? At what point during all of this did either a record label or something come to you that changed? Where you're not homeless, where you actually started making it.
I actually wanted to know how you found music and what that did for you. Like, what age did you, and who was like, do you remember exactly like what music it was, or artist, or?
Yeah, I mean, the two things I did the longest was, I always said when I got sober, I was like, I've been listening to this, I've been playing music and drinking for about 2 weeks apart for like most of my life. Yeah. And, I think that, I really my dad loved the Beatles. So I'm like, he listened to music. My father would come home from his second job and it was like when Dad came home from work, he wants to take a bath, and he would take a bath and read the Bible. And I would always be like, what is he? He's probably reading the Bible because of all that he had to deal with all day, literally. You know what I mean? He was like doing a janitor job during the day in the public school system in the hood, and then going and working another one at night in a different location. And, and he's like, this is a guy who adopted 3 kids with his wife, and like they couldn't have kids of their own. He's, sober and trying to break the family cycle because his father left him. And he would play his mixtapes, and he'd have all this cool music. So that started that. And then I like grunge. And then that wasn't really heavy enough, and then I heard Pantera. And I was like, what is this? And I was like, dude, we got to go to I'm like, can I borrow like $8?
Yeah.
It's like, why? Because we don't have $8. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll get a job. And like, I got it. I remember I to pay for concert tickets and CDs, I worked as a stock boy in Brooklyn at this place called what was it called? Not Papa Charlie's. It was, I can't remember. I had these bosses who were like a couple, and they were both drunk, and that's how I started getting booze. Because
would you steal it, or did they give it to you? Oh.
No, we would take the trash out, and we would put
bottles.
We would put ice in a garbage bag and put some of the beers there, and then throw them in the trash, and then wait in the baseball field across the street from the store, and then hop in the dumpster after they locked up at night, and then grab the bag with the red rubber band and go in the park. I told this one, and we would listen to like Black Sabbath and Pantera and Ozzy Osbourne, and I remember I was telling this story at a sober function, and I looked down, and I'm about to say Ozzy Osbourne, and he's sitting right in front of me. I was like, and there are artists of that nature, and everyone knew, because I had started the O. I was like, yeah, and, everyone's laughing. I was like, he's like, oh, So that's how it started, and then we started playing shows, And we were little scam artists. You know, we'd have the bass player's dad book us at CBGB's. And so they would be like, yeah, you guys can come do audition night on Tuesday. And we're like, oh, we got school. Like, all right, we'll steal Steve's mom's car and and we'll steal Mike's mom's credit card and we'll get equipment and we'll go down there and then we'll return the next day. And then we'll be back in time for school. Nobody will know we're even going. Yeah. We got caught doing everything. Like where the fuck are you guys at? There's no cell phones. We didn't even have pagers. We were the poor kids. And yeah, we'd show up to the venue and they'd be like, you guys aren't even old enough to be here.
That's passionate though, man. Yeah. That's like
And then and then there would be, you know, and we were I was with the same guys for 10 years. We all grew up together and they kept me out of a lot of trouble because I didn't want to do stuff to go to jail. I wasn't willing to, you know, when gangster rap was at its height and everybody was like everyone thought they were Tony Montana and Tony Soprano, you know what I mean? And Biggie Smalls. I was like, yeah, but I don't want to, we got a show. So you guys go and do that. And I'm not going to go to that, you know? And then the other hustle this was so ridiculous. So, and if Mike's mom ever sees this, I'm sorry, Suzanne, but this was my plan and I did this, I'm sorry. So we're like, you know, we were like, we want to play this show. And there's a battle of the bands to play with some big band, right? It might have been Biohazard, whatever. And we're like, I know what to do. I'm like, we need a credit card. And I'm like, okay. I was like, we'll steal Mike's mom's credit card. And he's like, and we'll order a school bus. And then we'll charge people for a ride to the show. And they were like, and you know, the guys are like, this is a fucking great idea.
Yeah.
So like, and we all went to different high schools. I wound up dropping out of high school when I was 17, but so we all went to different schools. So I was like, all right, boys, I'm going to tell the promoter, I'm going to guarantee we sell 100 tickets because nobody will sell 100 tickets. And they're like, how are we going to do that? I was like, bro, I got this. So I lie to the guy. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, and any that we don't sell, like, we'll just buy. He's like, who is this kid? And they're like, all right, cool. He's like, you sell 100 tickets, you got the show. So what we wound up doing is we ordered the bus for $150. We got the tickets where each ticket they were selling for $5. So we owed the club $2 per person. So they wanted $200. And I was like, we'll sell a cup, we'll get a keg, and we'll put a keg on the bus, and we'll sell the ticket to get in, and we'll sell the ride on the bus and the keg for $15. And everyone's like, bro, this is genius. He's like, well, nobody's got $15. I'm like, we got 2 months till the show, boys. Start collecting. Dude, this thing...
You were like the ultimate entrepreneur at a young age.
Yeah, but
it was kind of genius to a certain degree.
Anything to make the show happen.
Yeah.
Right?
He actually said scam, but it's actually pretty entrepreneurial.
Pretty smart. Yeah. No, it is.
So we pulled it. So we did the first one. So we're like, we're like, yo, bro, we're doing a show. Like, we're doing a show in the city with this band, and it's a battle of the bands, and everyone's like, all right, cool, like. And then the day that we do this, we had the bus shows up at 7:00 in front of a school because we couldn't have it go in front of anybody's parents' house, and we got my friend's alcoholic uncle to buy us the beer, and he just wanted to go ride on the bus and get drunk. So we got his nickname was Uncle.
Really?
And he was like, he had just gone
Everyone
through a
has an uncle
divorce.
like that.
Yeah, his wife had just left him, and he was like in that mess phase. Like he was hanging out with teenage kids. He was like 24. And we're like, bro, what are we gonna do? And Josh's like, I'll get Uncle Fucker to buy the beer. And we're like, boom, done. So we like literally, and then the bus driver was like this old brother, and we start showing up, and then Uncle is like, he puts the keg in the back, and he's like, you guys can't put that. He's like, and then all these kids start pouring on the bus, and we wound up selling like more than 200 tickets because other people were like, we'll just take the train, like the kids who are allowed from the other boroughs. And the guy, I went up to the guy like, bro, you got to talk to the bus driver, so we can't go. And I was like, I got this. And I was like, I had all the money, and I was like, he's like, I'm not taking you kids. Like, you guys can't be drinking and driving on my bus. He's like, da, 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 da. I was like, bro, here's $100. He's like, everybody on the bus. Like, yeah. I was like, yo, this is how money works. Like, we can do anything we want as long as we have money, which is literally reality.
Same today.
I mean? And so we went to the show, and then it wasn't even that smooth because we get there, and the promoter's like, I'm like, I give him the money for the tickets. I was like, we sold double the tickets. He was like, oh, okay. Bro, the bus opens up, and we drove 35 minutes from Brooklyn, but it's a bunch of teenage lightweights. It's like 18-year-old kids. They're throwing up. They're like coming off the bus like, "Bruh." He's like, yo, these kids can't come in the club. He's like, what is this? It's like, you said, he was like, these guys are underage. They can't even drink. I was like, well, I'll just take this money back and we could just go home. And we had the drums in the back by the keg. Like, the equipment was just sliding around the cheese bus. And I was like, we'll just go home and just get drunk. Like, we just made all this money. And he was like, put X's on all their hands. And then they let us come in and we played, and then that was it.
And how old are you at this point?
I was like 16.
Oh, okay,
so we did this for the next 8 years, all the time. And then the buses got nicer.
And what was the name of this band?
It was called Vext. That's how I got the name. So I was in the band, and there were other guys in the neighborhood named Tommy, and so I'm from Brooklyn, and everyone was like, yo, like, you know, Tommy Rodriguez, and they're like, hey, Roggy, like, you know, Joey Bag of Donuts, like, you know, that was a thing. So they're like, yo, Tommy Vext, and then that was my name forever.
So no one knows your real name then?
No, people know it, but it's like, I've been Tommy Vext longer than I was my real name.
You know what I'm thinking of right now? Have you seen Billy Madison? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of Chris Farley on the bus, them kids in the back.
He's like, I'll turn this bus around. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of right now.
He said, it was like an Uncle Remus dude. He's like, you both better behave. Like, quiet down. Like, we're like, oh, you know.
So go ahead.
So you were writing this music, or?
Yeah, it was terrible. We were terrible.
Do you have recordings of this?
Yeah.
You should post like an old school.
Some people still send me demo tapes like from back in the day.
That like
people
it.
have the tapes. Yeah, they're like, dude, when are you gonna put? Like, we had a song called "Et tu, Brute," which is like from Julius Caesar. Yeah. It's about being backstabbed. You know, like, we're like 16 years old. We thought we were super brilliant. And then there was another punk band that had the same name. We're gonna change the name. Somebody already came up with this. Like, those guys were smart.
What was the first instrument that you learned to play, or were you always singing?
I was always singing. So I barely can play piano to this day.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, I barely could play. The reason why, there's multiple reasons why. I got in a lot of fist fights, and I broke all my fingers. And I was like, well, I'm not playing guitar. You know? I was like, well, because if I play guitar, then I got to worry, like, I can't, defend myself, because if I break my finger, then, I'll just sing. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I was not very bright. In retrospect, I should have learned guitar, because if I just played acoustic, I could be doing Aaron Lewis concerts, just singing the ballads to the ladies. But nope, wanted to fight. Didn't pick up the guitar.
When did you get your first, like I mentioned before, like, when did you feel like I made it? Like, because you were in the smaller punk bands, is there a moment where
I was delusional? Yeah. I still haven't made it, number one. But
you performed in front of 100,000 people. You made it.
Yeah. Well, I did one show at 300,000, but it doesn't matter.
No, but I mean, was there a moment where you said, "Holy, I can make a living from this"?
No. So that thought never happened. But I'll tell you the most pathetic thing, bro. So I wound up signing a deal with on Century Media and Roadrunner to be in a death metal band, a melodic death metal band called Divine Heresy, and I thought this was it. And the guitar player was like, "Bro, you're gonna move in with me. Like, we're gonna make a record. Like, it's gonna be great." And I'm like 24, get on a plane. I have $300 in a bag with clothes in it. I'm like, sick. I land at LAX. He comes and picks me up. We go get a burrito, and then we drive to his house in Lincoln Heights, East LA. Mm-hmm. This is not the kind of place you want to be. But I'm from the hood. Yeah, so I'm like, whatever. And like, they live on a hill, and they live in a house, and there's like 30 people living in this house. It's all squatters, like all punk rock people. There was a homeless guy named Shoe who didn't have shoes, and he got to live in the house because his job was to clean the house. and he drank 40s. He was Native American, and they were running dope out of the house, and they had a room, and the room like could overlook like the East LA city skyline, and like I remember putting my bags down and being like, "This is it." Like I did it, yeah. I was like, "There's a lot of weird people in this house, but I'm sure they're probably cool." Like, yo, and that was the beginning of the show. Like, you know, it was just I never did methamphetamine before. That happened there. Like all this crazy, you know. So it was just nuts. And then I was broke. I had no car, so I got a job working at the Roxy and the Key Club Body, doing, you know, security work, and I could only afford canned tuna fish and rice. And then I had to put a bolt on the door of the fridge because the people who were squatting there would eat all the food. So only the people who paid rent, I gave them all a key, and all the homeless guys who were like living there were super pissed. But it was a punk rock squat house. It was literally like how when Metallica and Anthrax would talk about living in the Lower East Side in the early 80s. I was like, this is it. And I was fine with it. I was like, man, I got a job. I was like, you know, we're going to make a record. I'm like, this guy's famous. I'm like, this dude's living like,
yeah.
I'm like, I'm trusting this person who's got like 14 people living in his house and who is selling dope for him and his roommate. It was ridiculousness.
But let me ask you a question. Did you think that, you know, coming from New York, you had to go to LA to make it? Because that's how I felt with bodybuilding, like to be seen.
Yeah.
But was it like that in the music industry also? Did you see every band that came and they played on the Sunset Strip and all that, right?
Yeah, that was the Mecca, right? The Sunset Strip was the Mecca of rock stardom, right? You had the Rainbow, Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, like all the bands, even though, you know, the Whiskey and the Doors back in the day, Led Zeppelin, all these legendary artists that everybody had come through there. And I grew up in CBGB, so it was just a West Coast version of the culture, right? The small dingy rock bar with the artist that hasn't been, you know, discovered yet. And so, yeah, it was cool. It was like, I moved to LA in 2006, and it was like, you know, chicks were still sleeping with everybody and like showing their tits at shows, and it was like still it was like pre-Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you go see bands and like chicks are like, yeah, let's fucking do blow and fuck. And you're like, what the f is going on? Yeah. You know, I was used to like nice Italian girls. You're like, we got a date for like 3 months and then maybe I'll see a boob, you know? I gotta keep this appearance up. Like I gotta fucking.
I know, but what about relationships at this time? Did you even know what a relationship was? Could you be in a relationship? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I'm still actually friends with my ex-girlfriend. Like, she's probably one of the best people I ever met. When I was I got my jumped, and I got beat up pretty bad, and I was hospitalized because of like a fight with a drug dealer that I should have walked away, and I was like,
where did this take place?
This was in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And then so I got checked. I got a reality check, and I was like, I'm not selling drugs. I don't want to I'm not tough. I'm not going out anymore. I need to like heal from this and get a job or whatever. And I ran into this girl I knew from high school who I always had a crush on but was afraid of. And I asked her on a date, and then we started dating, and she was like a very nice girl. And I remember like, you know, my brother was running dope out of our house, and like he had prostitutes, and he had his friend Pookie who like broke into my room to smoke crack. And we were taking her little brother to the zoo. So we drove back to my place so I could get a change of clothes because I never wanted to go home. And like she saw what was going on, and she was like, yeah, like she was like, you know what, just like take your whole closet, just bring your whole closet. And then she asked her parents if I could move in with them. And yeah, and then her brother gave me a job doing construction. So I got legit, like I did. I you know, they really like that family loved me and then kind of put me back together again. But when I moved to LA,
you were back in the
yeah, and I was left to my own devices, and we were a 3-hour time difference, and I was so far, and we lasted a few months, and we went on vacation to Mexico, and you know, but it was like, you know, I was already off to the races. Like I didn't. The thing about being an alcoholic or an addict is that nothing overrides the disease, right? And the mental obsession. And so, if I probably never left LA, if I probably stayed there and had a regular life and got married and had kids and got a job doing construction and became a foreman and whatever, I might probably never drink again. I would just been a guy, but that's not me. And I didn't do that. And when I was away from her, she was so inherently good. I could not bring myself to hurt her feelings and disappoint her. And so I just had to cut and run. And and then I met the devil, so we broke up. I went about a year just partying and being crazy. And then I got into a suicide pact with my ex-fiance, and she liked to do drugs the way I like to do drugs, and she liked to party the way I did. And then we began this relationship of just absolute everything on the table. People are like, what kind of drugs did you do? I'm like, what do you have? And then that ran its course. It was it turned super, super bad. She got pregnant, and then I got sober because I followed what my dad did, and ultimately she had a late-term miscarriage because she relapsed during her pregnancy on opioids, and she almost died, and the baby died, and then we had a really pretty terrible breakup, never spoke to each other again. And then I was on tour singing for a band called Snot, had 2 overdoses, and then finally about a year of just being under the influence of cocaine, alcohol, pills, and methamphetamine for 365 days straight. I hit rock bottom, and then I asked for help, and then I got some help. So, it's one of those things that's everything, this is the thing. Everything is happening exactly the way it's supposed to at the moment that it's happening. It's just we don't always like the fact of the matter because we can't see the future. And sometimes things can be so bleak that the inability to see the future causes people to take themselves out. And I've had those experiences too. So music could not save me from that. And I had to get a bigger God. And that was the process. That was the beginning of the process. So
when did you start because I've seen you around the fitness industry for a while, whether it was with First Form or I've seen you with Rob Bailey. Where did that journey start for you, and how did you develop these relationships?
Well, I think the alignments, firstly, I conquered obesity, right? Obesity ran in my family from a nutritional standpoint, right? Because genetically, I'm not the same as these people. I'm adopted. But my Aunt Tina died at 52, morbid obesity. My mother, that scared my mom. My mom was obese, and then she lost 120 pounds. We had no money. She would get up every day, and she would walk around the park. She'd drop my sister off at school and walk for hours. And then walk, a mile to the park, miles around and back. And then, she had enough, and she didn't want to die young. And that had a similar effect on me. So losing the weight was one thing, but then also I did Cardio Queen, where I was like, I'm just going to take, Xenadrine and run. And so, and I'd run and do cardio and play basketball, and I'm like, why don't I look like this guy, It's so then I joined Empire Fitness, and I think that used to be owned by Lou Ferrigno. Mm-hmm. And and it was I met guys there. Again, I found other father figures, the old heads would be like, yo, kid, what are you doing? And then, the culture then was, you had to be very respectful. Right, you had to put the weights back. If they didn't allow you to just make a mess of the gym. It was a sacred men's space. There were no women in the gym either. When I was going, there was maybe sometimes there'd be 2 chicks, and it was somebody's girlfriend, and don't look at them because her boyfriend is 8 feet tall and they'll crush you. So we were going there to deal with stuff, and then we just we listen to music and work out, and the tempo of the music would set the workout. And so, you know, I think later on I wound up becoming friends with Rob and Andy and everything, more so in my success because my platform grew and the things that I was talking about, what we've been talking about, is very much aligned with the entrepreneurial mentality, the fitness space, the extreme ownership, right? Like Jocko talks about, and coming from one place and taking what could be considered something that would crush a person's spirit and using it as fuel to build yourself into what your dreams are, right? The manifestation, which I believe that, I believe in God and I believe in the spirit of the universe, and I'm constantly trying to understand that more. And in my seeking of understanding that, I believe that God individually loves every single one of us so much that that's what God wants for each of us, and we are actually all meant to kind of reach our maximum potential in our life cycle, you know what I mean, so that we can live the fullest lives and inspire other people, and to do so in, the kind of altruistic mentality of, I don't want to call it self-help, but it's like, but yeah, those principles are very much aligned with the fitness industry and the fighting industry, yeah.
Did you become addicted though? I mean, you have this personality. I mean, it seems like you went full tilt into something, like did the fitness thing become, part of your lifestyle immediately? Like, did you learn, like, obviously lifting weights and, you said you were doing cardio first.
Yeah. So I followed what I just wanted to be big. Right. And
what do you mean, muscular or?
Well, I didn't really know the definitive terms. Like a part of being physically healthy and having a pump and having size is a deterrent to violence in a concrete jungle, right? So that was really the reason. That's like I got completely tatted up and I started lifting weights because don't fool me.
It's intimidating, yeah.
Yeah. And meanwhile, like, I really was the kid who I got my kicked all the time until, and it's like until you learn how to fight, until, one day you come home and your dad's like, you get no fight? And you're like, yeah. Like, did you lose? You're like, mm-hmm. He's like, well, if you lose it again, when you come home, I'm going to kick your ass. And then you're like, oh. So then you learn how to not be afraid, And so some of those lessons, which, the modern world would call toxic masculinity, they actually are extremely valuable lessons, And so, but it's also, as men, when we get past those points, we have to identify, right? I call it uncover, discover, discard. We have to take the good from those experiences and evaluate it's like cutting the fat off a steak. Like, you have to evaluate what has no nutritional, spiritual value to you, and then allow that to be dropped off, right? Even a rocket ship, when they launch a rocket ship into space,
the rockets fall off.
It has to fall off in order for you to gain the trajectory to break through the atmosphere. So to me, some of the fuel, like you can't take it with you.
I remember when I first started, when I saw you doing the show last year for FitCon, and it rained out.
Oh yeah.
And I remember Rob was telling me, and I'm like, that name sounds familiar, and I looked it up. And I saw one of the records you performed, and I was like, hey, I saw that guy open up for Five Finger in Green Bay. And I told you this last time.
Yeah.
I was like, I saw him perform, and he's doing it at your show. Like, this is a sold-out arena in Wisconsin. And I that was the first. But then I've noticed you've been around the fitness industry.
And that was the first show I did. That was the first show back from COVID, and that was my first show as a solo artist. Yeah. So that was after I had left Bad Wolves in 2021. Yeah. It was packed. It was a great night.
Yeah, it was. That was the first kind of rock concert I'd been to in a long time, and I've been friends with Chris for a while. And he's like, "Hey, I'm in your neck of the woods," and I remember it was cold. And one of my friends and I went up there, and we went and saw the show, and I was like, "Man, I know that record he performed." And then like I said, I've seen you around the fitness industry since. Yeah. Since then, I've seen you more and more. Now it's like. On a regular basis.
Well, basically, like, the more the band blew up, the more I was like, my level of fitness was insufficient. Mm-hmm. And then I buckled down and I hired, so Josh Brolin was a buddy of mine for a while. And he played Cable in Deadpool 2. And his trainer, Justin Lovato
Yeah.
did an amazing job.
The Quad God, yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny because there were times, like back in the day, I've gone to golds with Josh before I was platinum. And then we went and worked out about a month after Zombie hit everywhere. And everyone's heads were exploding. They were like, because he had just dropped the Avengers Endgame with Thanos. So he was the most famous villain in the MCU world at that moment. He was Darth Vader.
Long way from the Goonies days.
Yeah. Brad, I'm pretty sure you should move that rock, Brad. Yeah. Back to the Goonies. It all comes full circle. Yeah. And people's heads were exploding. They were like, bro, they're like, oh my God, dude, Thanos. They're like, oh my God, the zombie guy. And so I was like Zombie Man until people started realizing I had a name. And he introduced me to Justin. Justin transformed everything I knew about fitness. I didn't know anything. I thought I knew all this stuff from the bros.
That was his name, the Quad God. You know that, right?
Oh, really?
I know now he's found him. He's doing more spiritual.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's.
We've done work
I don't know.
together.
I don't want to call it yoga, but I see he's doing a lot of.
He's doing breath work meditation. Yes. He does like Reiki healing. I've done sessions with him, and
that's more watched energy. Like,
oh yeah, and he's like super zen. He's one of the most like gentle, giant, peaceful, loving human beings.
He's going to hear this and say because he was known as he had crazy legs. He was a bodybuilder, right?
Yeah, I mean his legs were huge. I'm like, how do you do that? It's like, I don't,
It's genetic.
Yeah. I'm like,
it's like mine. Yeah.
I started doing them. I'm like, I gotta get like these guys. I'm like, it's never gonna happen.
Yeah, because he trained at the gym a lot. Josh was in the gym, and it's always kind of mind blowing. Like when you see all these people training, and But who was like the first? Like, do you see anyone that gave you? Was there any role models in fitness? Did you look at? Because listen, you're a performer, right? So are you thinking you're in a tank top and you're like, you're singing and your body? Like, when did you first start getting recognition? And like, who did you see that gave you inspiration other than these guys in the gym and all that?
Well, the celebrities obviously like were the Stallones and the Schwarzeneggers or what you know what I mean, and then. Ronnie Coleman. It's like, the more that you looked into it, and then I discovered you through the band Fear Factory. Mm-hmm. And I don't even remember how, but I was at the bass player's house, and he had like a fitness magazine. He's like, "Yo, it's my boy Jay." Well, I don't even know if he was your boy, like and I was like, "This is a human being." I'm like, "How is this guy this jacked?" And then you start reading the magazines, and then I was like, "Oh, this guy's It was like I forgot what magazine, but you had like a full on spread, like cover and expose, and you were doing. Like it was a full workout, and I remember reading it, and I was like, and I went in the gym, and I was just like trying to copy, but I wasn't doing it right,
And how old were you at this time? Because you're like 10 years younger than me.
I was probably like 22.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
I won the Olympia in 06 was the first year I actually won it.
Yeah. So this was probably right after that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in, I'm 41, and I was in LA, so it had to be after 06. Yeah, so it just, it was just one of those, it was just wild. And, yeah, and I don't know, it just kind of grew out from there, right? Like I became very close with Andy Frisella from First Form, kind of over the, we had very similar platform topics of conversation on Instagram and social media during COVID for multiple reasons, right? Like I've been a fan of Rage Against the Machine and, Pantera or bands like Machine Head and, Black Flag or, all these bands that talk about politics. And, I watched like a massive shift happen, and I never really, if you read my lyrics over the past 6-7 years, actually over my entire career, there's stuff in there, right? I'm expressing my opinions and my belief systems towards humanity in those things. And then in the Disobey record, it was a little bit more prevalent, right? The first Bad Wolves record, the first song is called Officer Down. And I took a stance in it, and the verses explained both sides of this very complicated issue of law enforcement dealing with the African American community and the impoverished communities, and why things, why, and at the end of the day, both the issues not being resolved, and both sides are suffering, and that it's not this one-sided thing, and the media is blowing this out of proportion because of clickbait and all this other stuff. And then, there's other songs that I talk about, the 13th Amendment. And then there's songs like The Conversation on the first record, which is talking about the intentional division of identity politics and the danger that is and the precursors of socialism to communism. So all these things, these are things that, it's in the music. So when I started talking about this stuff, and it was very, very tense because there was a lot of, there was a lot of interest in portraying Trump as Hitler, and anybody who was associated with white supremacy and all, basically all, it was just nonsense to me. And so, people was, doing all this stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'm not. And I'd get a lot of flack for it in the music industry.
People judged you, man.
Yeah, well, they were like, I had
you were all
white
over the
people
media,
being like, you're a disgrace to your race. And I'm like, maybe just listen to me. Just maybe listen to
people don't want to listen,
Yeah, I'm like, the only black guy in the
time.
entire metal industry. I'm the only African-American multi-platinum selling artist in the last probably 15 years. Maybe just hold a second, hold on and check this out. It started with I did a marker video, right? And the marker video got 37 million views in 48 hours. And it was like all broke loose because I am a researcher. And I was like, hey, this BLM thing, they're taking the money, and the company's called Act Blue, and it's a political party, and it's actually owned by most people don't know. They don't want to read a whole article of a news thing, much less they're not going to call their buddy in the FBI and pay to get a background check on a corporation. You know what I mean? So I exposed this stuff, and it, like, the hammer came down, one after another, death threats.
And you had a very public battle with your band and
that's where it all
record label.
That's where it all went, right? It all accumulated to the point of that space. And it started with, and again, it's like cancel culture was like at its peak moments. Yeah. And, our JBL speakers, they fired me. I lost my microphone endorsement from who was it? I don't even need to
give them credit.
Yeah, I don't even need to it wasn't Shure. We like Shure. Shure is okay. We use Shure now. Buy Shure microphones.
We are going.
They're not racist.
We're going to screen this, and we're going to send it to Shure. We're getting you a deal.
Yeah. I mean, we got money now. I could just buy their stuff. So anyway, so it just started with things like that, and then it just became, on when everyone posted a Black Square on Tuesday. The Black Square Tuesday thing, I posted a picture of me holding a blue line flag in an arena in front of 10,000 people, and it was everywhere. I mean, it was everywhere. And it was not a biased thing, right? I have family who's in law enforcement. My grandfather was a New York City, detective. I was a former criminal, and I understand the implications. In my day, if you committed crimes, you didn't fucking cry about it. You weren't if you sold drugs and you ran guns and you were on the street or you ran hose or any of that, if you got hemmed up, shut your mouth and do your time and shut the fuck up. And that's just not the case anymore, right? Like, I saw a lot of people who were criminals being turned into like saints because it was fulfilling a political, ideological, prophecy. And then also too, it's a way for them to disrupt, the flow of things, right? So it makes people afraid. People anytime there's like drama or violence, then they can capitalize on. You already have everybody at home because they're scared of COVID and we don't know what's going to happen, and they're all watching the TV and on the internet. So everything becomes viral. And they want to control the ability to make what they want viral because they have an agenda. And so they kept doing this stuff. And so I was just like, hey, they're doing that because of this. And I'm in Hollywood. I know how these campaigns work. I know when they want to destroy somebody or build somebody because I became famous in a week. I know how it goes, And so yeah, it just caused a lot of issues. Like people started getting real.
Did you ever sit back and say, "Oh no, should I have not," or you'd not like that?
Yeah. So the thing is that publicly everybody kind of pulled away from me, and I got dragged, but I got dragged by a minority of people. It's the media is comprised of people who went to liberal arts schools. They went to college. They've been thoroughly indoctrinated with socialist propaganda. We let this happen over 30 years, and it's like you can't undo. It's very hard for people who this is
what they were taught. Yeah.
Yeah. So while these people were going to school and their parents were paying for them to go to school to learn about racism, I lived it. I experienced both. I experienced good people and bad people of every kind of race and every kind of color and every kind of creed. Because when the shit in the fan, you find out who's good and who's bad because you're in like life-threatening situations, or you're just trying to work, or I've worked security with guys who were, I had a guy who was Jewish and a guy who was Asian and a guy who was black and a guy who was Hispanic, and like there's a guy with a gun in the club and we have to get him, and like there's no race when the shit's the fan. And there's no race in the gym, and there's no race in God's kingdom. So I come from a place where, I see that I know the truth. And so these people are not able to hear what I'm saying because while they were being engineered, I was experiencing. And so everything that I did was the antithesis of what their engineering is. And that's why we have so many problems with the media and social media. And, they don't teach the Constitution in college. They're not teaching people about their rights. They're not teaching about, that how many people have died over the years and sacrificed their lives so that we are able to live in a free society. They don't understand the difference between a free market and a controlled market, which communism is a controlled market, right? It's not about the voice of the people deciding the products they're going to use. It becomes what the government allows in their deals with the corporation for the people to have. And that's what they're trying to slowly convert this country generationally into accepting these ideas as normalcy. And I have a problem with that, and so I never would have thought voicing my opinions against communism would have led to the amount of people people's feelings were fucking hurt, bro. It was crazy. My guitar player at the time called me. He was crying. He's like, I can't believe you would do this. And I was like, did you watch the video? He's like, you blame the Democrats. I was like, no, I didn't. I'm like, they own the company that takes the money.
So he was listening to the media before, probably.
I mean, he's thoroughly indoctrinated.
Yeah.
You know what the hardest part about listening to people argue about politics, and I tell them this all the time, it seems like 95% of adults don't understand that we have three branches of government. They don't understand their roles.
Correct.
And like how many times people message me, hey, you know what so-and-so did? And I'm like, okay, where'd you see that from? I saw it on Facebook. I'm like,
yeah.
Do you understand? Did you pass third grade social studies? You realize that person's not in control of that, right?
Yeah.
And the storm that we have now started in the 70s, and it's gotten worse and worse. But we're now at the moment in time where it's right in front of our face. So you can either deal with it, it's going to get worse, but you can't just point the finger right now. You have to look back and see the whole system and go, how can we revamp everything?
It's been playing out for a long time, yeah. So I would say 30, but maybe 50 years, maybe, and we were talking about this the other night at dinner. A lot of people don't understand, like, the president's not the king. It doesn't work. Like, people are like, oh, Biden's doing this, and everyone's
That's
like,
all you hear.
Trump
now,
is doing that, and Trump
like
is
gas
this.
prices or this, or the president's fault.
Well, then they blame, but then he goes and blames it on Russia, and I'm like, we only take 3% of our oil from Russia, and you shut down the Keystone Pipeline and put 80,000 Americans out of work, and we would have been energy independent. And people are like, you can't say that. I'm like, what? That's just the things that happen. I'm like, what, huh? And everyone, the tribal it's so effective. I wish if I had the mind that organized this divide, I would literally just put everybody back together again. Because the people who are coming up with these psychological strategies, they're basically using it for evil. But imagine it's like I always say, like, think about if Hitler took all of what he created and used it in love instead of hate and did good. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What kind of a world will we be in if when men come into large amounts of power and influence, they actually honor the creator and they actually, I think that's where we're going in this. I think, as people are starting to, the veil is falling. And as people are starting to see that the system is broken, I think that humanity is going through a spiritual transformation where we've kind of been in kindergarten. And, when kids got to go to the next school, they're crying and they're scared and I don't like this change. That's not the teacher I know. And everyone's stomping their feet. But I'm like, but what's happening is that people are homeschooling their kids. This is not an experiment. We've homeschooled kids for there was no school. School as a concept is a couple hundred years old, maybe. Yeah. You know what I mean? Family units, it's like people are rejecting modernity and now going back to tradition. And so you're seeing the attack on the nuclear family having the resistance is not one of violence, but it's one of love. And people are like, all right, if you're going to put sexual books and sexual things in schools, I don't even care. I'm just going to take my kids home and I'm going to raise them with the values and the beliefs that I believe, and I'm going to instill in them who they need to be, which is absolutely more valuable.
How did you get connected to the former president?
Oh, Trump?
Yeah.
Well, I wore a MAGA hat on Instagram, and it went viral, and that was the lever, right? So that triggered the record label, the band, the media. The coup was finally secured because I was making people too much money to get to they couldn't just, they were like, we just got to get him back under control. I was like Kanye Westing it. They're like, if we just get him, he's problematic and he's not staying on the script. He's not staying in the script. And then, you have to understand too, like if I'm talking about, pharmaceutical medications that I don't support and the person who owns my record label has $20 million invested into that company and I'm like, don't take this. He's like, my investments. I was like, you're not taking it. He's like, it doesn't matter. It's no, like, I'm like, it's immoral. He's like, there are no morals. It's the music industry. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got to get out of here.
It's kind of true.
So it's like, in my naivety, I'm like, I have this platform and I have to express the truth, right? I have to tell people what's going on. Like I'm having conversations with Dr. Nina Simone and Dr. Rashid Buttar and Robert Malone way before Joe Rogan. And I'm like, it's a lie. Like, I started saying all this stuff and people were like, you're going to get grandmas killed. You're going to kill everybody. I was like, I had COVID twice. I'm like, you're not going to die. Like, I
still never had it.
Yeah. And it's like, it was just all in this time period. It was like a lot of this chaos going on. And then, I had strikes for the BLM thing, strikes for supporting law enforcement, strikes for supporting the military, it was just like, and then it came down. So what wound up happening is, there was a coup put together to force me to leave the band. And I was willing to, right? Because we negotiated good terms. We didn't ink anything, I made a mistake there. And the initial split was amicable in the way that I was like, look, we're dealing with cancel culture. People are trying to cancel the band as it was expressed to me, which turned out to be not true. And I said, I'm going to leave. And we had agreed that I would take all my songs that I did with me. At the time of negotiation, I believe the label was under the impression that anyone else in the band had actually contributed to the writing. And the reality came to the point where when it was like there was a 50 song list that I had recorded. I recorded 50 songs in 2020. I'm a workaholic, and nobody was in the studio, so I had all the studio time I needed, and so I went to work, and then I did a GoFundMe to pay the studio bill, trying to raise $50,000 to get 50 songs, and I raised $192,000 in like 48 hours. And the whole industry was like, it was the hatred and the resentment.
I love that because it's kind of like a.
But I didn't do it in a malicious way. I just was like, hey, like
I need money.
I'm gonna like if anybody who donates to this, whether it's $1 or $10 or $100, I'm gonna give you an album out of all these songs. So people were like, I'll give them $1,000. You know, like Jelly Roll gave me $2,500 and like a bunch of rappers were like the system, and you know, it was like all patriots. I think like half of LAPD sponsored it. It was crazy, and I was like, oh my god, I think we're gonna be okay. And then the whole deal was pulled out from under me, and I was told I couldn't have any of my recordings, and they were gonna do this and do that and do that. And then, you know, ultimately, a 10-month lawsuit ensued. There were some disparaging conversations that happened. There, you know, and then we settled on terms without going into the lawsuit, which were mutually agreeable, and I was very pleased. And I didn't get to keep all my songs, but I got to keep most of them, and the other ones I sold, and just peaced out. But
So have you developed a relationship with Trump from this?
Yeah, I mean, so the TMZ article was lead singer of Bad Wolf Sue's band and manager for being fired for supporting Trump, which was in part the reason. Yeah. That went everywhere.
I'm sure.
So I wasn't even trying to have a big public thing. I just wanted what was rightfully mine in the agreement to be upheld, and then it turned into a nightmare. So that went out. TMZ posted it. Trump Jr. posted it. I got like 100,000 followers. And it was just like this thing. And then I went out on tour and I sold out my tours with no help, nothing. I just went out. I announced I was going out, and I went across the whole country the whole summer of 2021. I refused to do mask mandates. I said no to everything. And then I brought a videographer. I did free meet and greets at every show to prove that I wasn't scared of COVID. And I met 500, 600 people a night, took pictures with them, never got sick. And I was like, and as a result, like everything started to open up. So even though everyone hated me, they watched me, and then they were like, oh, it's okay now. Nobody wanted to be the first. And I'll never get credit for all the things that I did. You know what I mean? Because I'm the enemy. But, you know, courage is not the absence
Have people
of fear.
that were like kind of going at you, have they circled back and kind of like either publicly or quietly just been like, hey man, I messed up?
Mostly on the back end, but a couple, you know, publicly, like, you know, me and Ivan had very, you know, a falling out, you know, and we had a tumultuous friendship because I think there was a part of him that felt resentful when I filled in for him, and we've reconciled this, and I believe that he at one point felt like I was coming for his job when I literally was in my job. My job was to
fill in for him,
was to make sure that the light stayed on, because when, you know, canceling a show costs
hundreds of thousands, if not millions.
Yeah, that they're at that level. So it's like I just did what I was hired to do, you know, and like, you know, now he's my brother and I love him, and we're, you know. And that was a lot of people in the music industry. I just was at a festival at Sick New World in Vegas, and I haven't been to a festival. I played one in 2021, but if I haven't been to a show that I wasn't playing since I got canceled, and everybody was glad to see me.
Like, how did it make you feel?
It was great. It's great because I just assumed nobody liked me, so I just keep to myself. And, you know, me and Max went, and, you know, a couple of our other friends, and you know, everyone, hey, you know, and then people were like, bro, like the fist sign, like power to the people. And I was like, I mean, what do you mean? He's like, bro, yeah. Like I don't want to say people's names, but like really famous fucking people. And I was like, where were you 3 years ago, bro? You couldn't post one thing. You couldn't back me up, But it's like, this is the thing, it's like it's like the meme with the Roman emperors where he's slashing the slaves. And it's like one guy stands up and then 3 guys stand up and then everybody stands up. So people like, I think like, and this is why I've become friends with people like Andy Frisella, Ian Smith, these guys stood up, Sean Whalen, like a lot of people got real loud. They were like, I'm not doing this, and I was one of them. And so, it's, a lot of people were talking about, there was so many weird hokey things going on in 2020 and everyone's like, it's the Great Awakening and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, to me, the Great Awakening was realizing everyone realized who was who. Everyone realized who was a sellout. Everyone realized who was a shill. Everyone realized, it was an intelligence test, right? Everyone got tested and you saw who your real people were. And I think the beautiful thing out of it is like, in my heart, I've forgiven pretty much everybody. I spent months and months every morning praying for all these people and people who I just wanted to mash, you know what I mean? But that doesn't serve me. And all these people I look at, they were victims, of the in-house drive-by, right? The Rage Against the Machine song. It's like you turn on the TV, you turn on your phone, you turn on the computer, and you're just constantly being bombarded with this frequency that it's disharmonious,
I mean, we tried to through all the shutdown and everything, it's like we tried to carry on with business, and it was like we still booked things, and it was like cancellations, this, that, and they're like, do you guys? I said, we're coming. Like, it's not up to, if we can get there, we're coming, but it's like we kept getting shut down. So
the only time
that's actually when we started the podcast.
Oh, really?
Because we're like, are we ever going to do this? Are we going to travel again? Because we were on the road like every weekend
for years.
So I said, you know what? We want to speak to people and be able to communicate. And so I said, why don't we do this podcast? Because we don't know if it's ever going to get back, which I still feel there's a lot of suffering at the expos and travel. It's kind of like after 9/11 happened, it changed travel forever. This expo and event, it's like people are still in masks, right?
The only time we really wore masks, the only time we really wore them is when we'd get on planes. Mm-hmm. But other than that, like any of the place we'd go to, if they had some mask mandate ahead of time, we'll just wait till you don't have one. But we still would
he wouldn't wear a mask. That's a difference, right?
I had a couple there was a couple of things. Like I wore a mask in a plane, not in the airport, I wasn't as extreme as some other people. Like Ian Smith he'd bring a bag of almonds and he would eat one almond for a 4-hour flight. Just absolute protest.
Just to prove, yeah.
Yeah. I had, guys like, they bought planes. We can't all do that, you know what I mean? Like,
see, why didn't you buy a plane?
I was going to fly to Germany. Germany locked us out,
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were the worst. Yeah. Even when we traveled.
Them in Canada, I think, were really
like
ridiculous.
we literally, if you had flew through their airspace, you had to wear a mask. It was the weirdest thing ever.
We went to Canada. So for people that don't know, when you're in Canada and you come back to the United States, you go through U.S. Customs in Canada, not here.
Yeah.
So you'll love this story because this was he got into a big fight.
we go through, and I said, "Oh, passport." And the 2 days before we came is when the Supreme Court said no more masks. So we go through, or the federal judge, we go through. We said, "Oh, welcome to the United States." Off comes the mask. So we're getting ready to get on the plane. The lady's like, "Where's your mask?" I'm like, "I don't need it." She's like, "Well, yeah, you do." I said, "Am I in the United States?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Then I don't need it." And she's like, "But you're in Canada." I said, "No, I'm not. It says you welcome the United States back there. I don't have to wear the mask." And I looked at the lady, I went, you don't even have a mask on. Why are you telling me to wear one? And then he just walks through. So we go to get on the plane.
With no mask.
No masks. And everyone has masks on. I'm like,
we sat there and we like waited because we just got into an argument. And I said, I'm not wearing one. I'm just going on the plane.
Yeah.
And he was arguing with the woman. I'm like, I'm just leaving because she's not even understanding what real sense is.
We're the only two on the plane with no masks.
She
and
sits
I'm like,
there and says, yes, we're in the United States. And he's like, well, does this make sense to you? And she's like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing about when you see how people comply, right? How they were able to socially engineer compliance, right? I mean, this is something that, these people were a victim of. And what it is if you can convince, this is what gaslighting does. Like narcissists gaslight people because what gaslighting produces is a stripping of your dignity. Now, if I can convince you to do something that is nonsense and you comply, you lose a little self-respect each time.
of course.
So the rules were there were psychological implications to create a societal response that was on behalf of those who were in authority, like going to a restaurant, right? You have to wear a mask to go inside, but when you sit down, you're safe from COVID, so you can eat your meal. But if you go to the bathroom, you have to wear a mask because COVID exists. What is COVID only live?
It's in bathrooms.
Yeah, it's 4 feet and up. Is that what it is? Because if that was the case, I would have run around a tricycle for 2 years.
I felt LA County was the worst for it, and you were living in LA County, correct?
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah, that was the rule. Then it was like, wait, lest we not forget, standing 6 feet apart to get on a plane. Socially distancing.
You sit right next to someone.
Yeah.
Their knees touching yours.
Yeah, and they're like, well, the plane's filtration system kills the bacteria and virus. I'm like, no such technology exists, ma'am. It was like,
I got in an argument with someone and they were telling me about the masks, and usually I just ignore it. I said, can you smell a fart through that? She's like,
oh, yeah.
I said, so you mean the most deadly virus on earth can't get through this mask, but a fart can, and it went through someone's jeans, and it got to you?
Yeah.
And they just kind of stare at you, and I said,
that's the fluoride stare.
Do you still feel canceled?
Look, the premise of...
you just talked about the positivity you're receiving from your peers, right? But
it's like it's cancellation is by the gatekeepers, right? So it's like the unseen upper, like the people who have the most amount of money control everyone. And it's that way in the industry. It's completely, it's not a free market anymore. So do I feel canceled? I don't, there are financial effects. Like I've been put into positions where, my Instagram was deleted. I had 350,000 fans on Instagram.
Can you get back on or?
No, I tried to pay $20,000, $30,000 and there's a tag on my account in Metaverse that says banned for life from one of the higher ups, which I can't say my sources, but it basically means someone very wealthy called someone very important and gave them a large sum of money to, basically impede me from reaching my audience. Now I understand this. I don't feel like this is a personal thing. This is a market issue because what happened to me was I wound up going from being, yes, I sold a platinum record. I have gold records. I was, but I came out in a place and a time where no one was being the voice of the proletariat. No one was speaking on behalf of people's rights. And the fan base and the audience sort of gravitated towards me. And then again, I had a very good year in 2021. I had absolutely outrageous sales numbers and ticket sales for an artist that was not being promoted by any of the major companies, was not allowed in any of the major venues. Everything was through social media. And so that had to go because I'm actually controlling the market. So I actually had that much impact that they were like, this guy has to go. We can't compete in the marketplace because he's saying these things that everyone wants to, you had a time where if you if you posted like, I don't like this on Facebook, they give you a strike or they just take your profile down. So I was experiencing what everyone was experiencing, and I was going on stages and saying it in front of thousands of people. So I gained favor, and it's the same thing. Look, this is the thing. If I wasn't an artist and I was a political person, they would have killed me, right? If I was Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. or whatever, they'd be like, this guy's gone. We got to get rid of him. You know what I mean? But I'm not running for office. So they're just like, we'll just mute him.
Did you ever fear that, or?
No, because I don't fear death. I've already experienced death. I've met my creator. I was murdered in 2010. My twin brother tried to murder me. So, my experience with that. And
how did that happen?
He was on drugs, and he broke into my apartment, and I came home, like mid-home invasion. And he wound up hitting me from behind with a crowbar. So I had a fractured skull in the back, and we fought, and he broke my forearm, and then it beat me till my spleen burst. And so, I ran to a neighbor's house, collapsed, ambulance took me, went to the ER. And I flatlined in the ER eventually. I had internal bleeding. They didn't realize what was going on. And, I had like a full near-death experience. And, God is real for sure. I don't know, whatever people want to call it, there is a massive, all-knowing, all-powerful presence of consciousness that everything is derived from, and it's inexplicable. It's unfathomable in human English words or emotions to explain how much this entity loves us. Like, it really does. And I think that our souls might all be fragmented pieces of it, or like almost, I kind of theorize that God actually puts pieces of itself in every person to have experiences, to experience reality in the third dimension. And we're actually not disconnected. There really is no race. There's no nothing. There's like the human race, and the human race is we're like these little pieces of light that derive from one central, like, supercomputer of consciousness. And when we were born, we forget. But it was my experience that when I was dead, I was thousands of years old. I knew, like, I can't remember. I can't bring with sufficient force, the recollection of these emotions and this knowledge. But I was at peace, and I knew everything. And then I went to a place, and I saw people that I knew. I don't know who they were. No one had bodies. We were all made out of light, and they informed me that I had not completed my task. And then I realized, I was like, oh, I didn't do it. I didn't finish. I'm not finished. And then I came back to life. I fell through the atmosphere right in my hospital bed. I watched my body from above my body, and then I went, shh. And that changes you, because most of the things that gripped people, the fear that gripped people during COVID was like loss of life and loss of a loved one. And I was sort of changed, and you can never turn a pickle back into a cucumber. Once you feel that, you can never be regular again. And the only other people, I've talked to a lot of people who have had near-death experiences. The only other people who experience anything remotely close to it was like DMT. And so I definitely don't, I considered that maybe it was a hallucination, but too many things have happened in my life that are spiritually aligned, and you get these little downloads and messages, and then things start happening, right? So doors in my life, I think karmically I did a lot of good, and I had completely turned my life around. So a lot of doors opened up, and the flow of energy was super powerful. And so I was in the situation where, you know, I had spent years engaging in selfless altruism, where I got to a place where I was like, I don't know what my purpose is. What am I doing? And then this was a time after I moved back to LA from New York, and I'd survived all that stuff and got an apartment. I tried to start a nonprofit. I failed at that. And I was like, all right, dear God, I'll do anything. And every day I didn't even have a bed. I was a mattress on the floor still. And I'm like 30. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where. I've always thought I was supposed to do this music thing, but if that's not it, just show me where I'm supposed to be. And then, I'd go to a meeting, and there was an old guy who was like, could someone help me move a furniture? And I was like, and then, so I helped, this guy, Leroy, move furniture. And then I painted houses. And then somebody asked me if I could watch a rehab. And then I got hired by the rehab. And then I started working and living at a facility, and I started taking care of all these men. And I had to, I was like the house dad. And, my corny ghetto, like, these are all very wealthy young kids who are like early 20s, and their parents are super rich. I mean, like relatives of like jobs, people like, Silicon Valley money and celebrities. And they think I'm bad, and I'm just like, like, yo, Tommy's crazy. He died. Like, he sold drugs. Like, it's like, okay. I'm like, bro, it's not 8 Mile, bro. Like, And then I did a really good job. I really cared. And then my boss, he paid for me to get trained and then certified, and I became a sober coach. And then, I remember one day, he's like, yo, you got to talk to this kid. I'm like, all right, cool. I was like, where do I got to be? He's like, listen, don't act weird. I was like, why would I act weird? He's like, I just have to say that. He's like, I can't tell you anything else. Meet me at this address. So I go to this address in Beverly Hills. And this guy who's like, I mean, bro, he's like you on your shoulders. I was like, Jesus Christ, what the? I was like, what's up, Lurch? He's like, you Tommy Vext? I'm like, yeah. He's like, come this way. He's in a suit. We go in this door, elevator. We go up to a penthouse. And my boss is there, and there's a doctor, and he's like, sit down. He's like, so this guy's gonna come in here? He's like, he's real problematic. I was like, okay. Oh, he's like, is he a big guy? Because I've had football players and stuff like that, and it's hard to deal with someone who's coming off drugs. And this little guy walks in, and he's like, what's up? This is Justin Bieber, and I'm like, what the? And that was my first huge client, and God bless Justin, man. Like, he's the only person I'll ever say who I worked for, but man, he turned it around.
Are you close to him still?
No, all my clients after it's in my contracts, we terminate contact. So I haven't seen him in probably like 6 years. But yeah, it was not good, and now he's like, he's married. He's a man. He has a testimony. He has a story. He really he has a walk with Christ. That was his salvation, and that was one of the greatest privileges of my life, is watching people get their lives back. Right, like in this situation with Ivan, I wasn't really the guy. I wasn't there to be a sober coach, but I was there as a fire extinguisher. And now, he's opening a rehab. He's 5 years sober. He's like a responsible dad. He's, and I'm like, yeah. And so I had this whole, and with the energy thing, it's like everything was opening and good and good and good. And then all this commentary on the internet, it was almost like somebody put a curse on me. And it was real weird. Like a lot of spiritual darkness started happening. And then since I've been going back into a spiritual place, and it almost neutralizes it, right? Because hate can only feed off hate, right? It's like if someone's like, you're on Twitter, and you're like, all they did, they actually succeeded. They literally brought you down a peg,
Because you responded.
Yeah. Whenever somebody's like you, I'm like, man, I love you. Like, what? I had a guy on Facebook, and he was like, I posted a music video, and this guy was like, look at this guy. He's like, I'd have muscles too if I was all jacked up on steroids. And I was like, hey man, I was like, that I actually take that as a compliment. So thanks. He's like, yeah, you would. I was like, hey, check this out. And I sent him a picture of me when I was 330 pounds. And I was like, hey, listen, man, I want to help you. And I was like, I'll pay for your meal prep for 3 months. And I'm going to give you all of my workout plans, everything that I paid for, right? Everything Justin taught me, everything I've learned from Max, or, you know what I mean? All the people in my life who are, all the fitness stuff. I'm like, have you heard of 75 Hard? He blocked me. And that's the thing is like, what I realize is that when you commit to your shortcomings, the grand prize is that you get to keep them. And so a lot of these people who poured a lot of hatred towards me, it's because I represent something that they can't be or don't want to do the work to be. And I need to be in a place of compassion for them, or I look a certain way, or I sound a certain way, or I speak in a way that reminds them of someone who hurt them. That too happens. And so if we're going to get back on track with society, the dividing line has to get swept, because we have to meet back in the middle. Yep. Being moderate, being sensible, common sense, value, love. The thing about love is unconditional love for your fellow man is probably it will be the hardest thing any man practices. It's almost impossible. Like nobody, like Christians say, no one can live a perfect life. Like Jesus in Christian religion lived a perfect life. And Christians should try to live up to that, right? Whether you believe in Christianity or not, the principles of the spirit of the universe that created this entire place for us to be here is not pleased. It does not please it that we should hate each other. It does not please it that we should war with each other. It does not please it that there should be a financial class system. It does not, the entire earth is a literal physical manifestation of the infinite abundance and the gifts that we as human beings and other organisms on this planet we've been in. Like dude, imagine what inheritance to inherit this place, and then look at what we're doing with it, and look at what we're doing with each other. And that's where kind of I am in my spiritual life now, it's time to graduate from this class. It's time to, look at who I was and ask myself, who am I willing to be? So that I could look like that in the spiritual realm.
Let me, yeah,
of course. To be a spiritual giant.
So you said the music was terrible that you wrote.
Yeah, when I was little.
Now, tell me, like when you write this music, you said you buried yourself in, you wrote a lot of these verses and everything else. Do you need a specific like pattern to do that? Like, tell me, like when you sit down and you write this, like, is there a place? Is there a kind of headspace you need to be in? Is it morning? Is it night? Is it just, these thoughts come to mind that,
like, it depends, right? Like if you're talking about a political song, it's more cerebral. You know what I mean?
So when you write, like, for example, like if you put a song together with lyrics, is it like one session of, or is this like thoughts that come through? So you write maybe a quarter of it or half, or how long does it take you to comprise
the whole record at once? Or?
Yeah, like how does it how do you comprise what lyrics match with?
Well, sometimes,
is it a gift?
No, because it's like how do you become Jay Cutler? Practice. Like you do something so
I don't think about it. That's what I'm saying. So now I have a gift, but I believe I had a gift, right? When I found the gym, I joined the gym at 18, and for the first time in my life, I grew up the youngest of 7 kids, I was actually really good at something. Like, that's the one thing that kept me in the gym is I was like, wow, I feel great in here. It wasn't even about, I want to be the biggest guy on the street, right? Or I want to be the next Stallone, or, you know, he was my inspiration, by the way. So we kind of looked at the same people, but I just realized that, like, I can do this. I'm good at it. I get recognition. I like the way it gives me, like, I look in the mirror and I'm like, wow, I actually like the way this looks. But it was just like I was really good at it.
So, I mean, I think that it was a calling on your life, right? And so, you know, I think what bodybuilders do for a non-competitor is you actually are showing the physical manifestation of the human will and what the human will is capable.
Yeah, because we push ourselves back, you know.
I mean, beyond.
the
I mean, it's beyond. It's like
I think, and I'm like, I said this line, and it seems to catch now in today's social media. I said, you have to be a little bit crazy to do what I do, because who wants to go in the gym and push themselves to a pain zone where you're wincing, right?
Sure.
And you're like, okay, I know this, my body's resisting this, but I love it. It puts me in a realm of like, man, I'm a few that could do this, right?
That's the love for the music. It's not necessarily the process of how you write. If you look at my catalog from start to finish, there's a massive evolutionary shift with almost all artists. But the insanity part, is the inability to reconcile the fact that because I spend all my money on the studio and because I bought all this gear and I'm like, I'm broke and I could barely pay the lights on and like I can't get a girlfriend because I can't afford to take her to dinner.
Same thing for bodybuilders.
Yeah, it's the same. That's why we get along, because, you know, when I went platinum, the headlines would read, you know, Tommy Vext, Bad Wolves, overnight sensation, millions of records sold, 27, number one in 27 countries. I'm like, I'm 36, bro. 36. Started at 14. And it's last man standing. It is the last man standing. It is, if you have to be insane enough, or you have to love it so unconditionally. You know, maybe it's not insanity.
It isn't, but we're just using that term. This is a broad term, okay?
Yeah.
So this isn't
maybe we're the sane ones.
Because society thinks insane means really bad, right?
Yeah.
But we're using it as like a obsessive, motivated, everything.
It's something you love and you'll do whatever you have to do to achieve it.
Yeah. But I think maybe the problem is just the way that society is built is that it is not creating champions.
Do you
anymore.
know not many people can focus on that one thing? So I'm actually curious how you can sit down and you can like put your head into doing this.
Well, so the process changes, right? So if I'm going to write a song like Remember When, it took me about a decade to be able to tell the narrative story about what happened between my brother and I. And the truth is that my brother was like kind of my hero. So it was like I never publicly reconciled that the pain of what he did to me hurt so bad, because he was cooler than me and he was tougher than me and he was bigger than me, and like he did not give a and where I come from, like that was admirable, you know, and like
yeah, but you guys are twins, like
yeah, but we're not the same. He's a little nuts. And in the street, that works. And you know what I mean? And that's what we look up to. Like we grew up idle. You know, when when the bottle took my father, it took the idea of the hard working class man was weak now. And that the gangsters were tough. And like, why get a working man's a sucker? You know, that Bronx Tale quote, you know what I mean?
Bronx Tale.
And then, and there's
a sucker, Dad.
Yeah. But he's like, you know, that's the whole thing about people ride the bus and every day they see me and they love me. And he's like, people say hi to them because they're afraid of them. And that's the difference.
Fear lasts longer than love.
Well,
that's what they said in the movie.
Yeah, that's what they say. I don't think that's the truth, because look at I'm a perfect example of that. It's like, you know, like love, unconditional love will endure, right? It's the reason why people get flowers. More people get flowers at funerals, because regret is stronger than gratitude, because people don't practice gratitude. If you know, we're dropping all these jewels, but and I'm like getting diverted from the chorus. But I think it's like it starts with a conversation, right? So I sit with a writer, and in this particular song, I collaborated with an artist named Drew Folk, and I said, hey, I have a really important song to sing, and I have to say this thing, and I need you to give me a musical bed for me to really say this thing. And the structure of the song, I could send you the demo. It's completely different. The chorus wasn't the chorus. The bridge was it was all
helped
switched.
Put it together.
That's what we created, and then I sat with it, and I called Zoltan from Five Finger Death Punch, and I was like, hey man, like, you know my story. This isn't right, but I think there's something in here. And he was like, it's just too slow. And I was like, fuck, that's it. So we sped it up in the computer, and then I like took it and cut it and rearranged it. And I was like, oh, there it is. I was like, we got to re-record the whole thing because my voice sounds like a chipmunk. But and we were on tour. And so I literally called the studio in Stockholm, Sweden, went to Purple Skull Studios on the day off, walked in, sang it in 2 hours, left. And that song wound up, being the third biggest hit of my career.
On a different tip, just because I worked in the music industry for a long time, explain the Zombie process of being able to use that record. Because obviously it was a Cranberries record. What was the process you had to go through to be able to redo that song?
Well, so I was a huge fan of the Cranberries, right? They were like, I love that band. And then, the thing about Bad Wolves is it's not a band. There's like the drummer and me wrote different songs completely separate from each other. And we had a studio guitar player who we would hire. And then he would play the guitar parts for drums, John's drumming. And I would have fully composed songs.
So you're saying it wasn't necessarily a band?
No, it was two separate writing teams, almost like it would be like if 9 Inch Nails had two guys. Yeah. And then the other guys were just hired guns. And so when I sang for Five Finger, because I was so successful, they were like, who's this guy? And I was literally just taking these shows and just putting everybody right here and just crushing it, and that's 20 years of work. So they signed me, and I was in two bands at the time. I was in a metal band called Westville Massacre, and Bad Wolves was a side project. And, the songs that we had a bunch of metal songs, and they were not suitable for an active rock radio label. And I had recorded the song Zombie in 2016. This is the real story. There was a script that I was supposed to read that was like, well, I was like this and that. And in 2016, the song was recorded, and Philip Naslin was also a sober coach with me. That's how we met. He played all the guitars on it, and I programmed the drums, and he played the piano, and I sang it. And when we submitted the Bad Wolves record, the label said, you don't have any hit songs. You got to go back in the studio. And I was like, well, I have songs that I wrote that are, I know how to write these kinds of songs, and I have a cover song, and maybe they'll like the cover song. So I sent them, they basically were like, let's listen, let me hear. So I sent them everything I had, and those became the singles. And Zombie was one of them, and I was afraid to put it out. And the band, I remember Doc and John were like, we will absolutely not have a cover on this record. And I was like, okay. And I was on tour with Five Finger in England at Wembley Arena, and I met Dan Waite, he's the president of the UK office. He's been friends with Dolores for like 17 years. He said, hey, he introduced himself, and we actually talked about meditation and spirituality, and he was like, I heard the song, the Cranberry song, and I really think it's great, and I know that, you guys are saying you don't want to put it on, but I really think it needs to be on the record. And I was like, he was like, well, I'm friends with Dolores. What if I get her to say it's okay?
Which, for people who don't know, it's not an easy thing to get a record cleared like that.
No. And so I was like, well, if she gives us a thumbs up, then we'll put it out. So it's like right before Christmas. I fly home from Europe. I go to New York. I see my mother I get a phone call. Dan's got Dolores on the line. Dolores is like, it's killer. Like this. She's like, I want to sing on it. I'm like, what? I'm like, whatever you want. Like, yeah. So I call the band. I'm like, guys, like Dolores is singing on Zombie. They're like, shut the fuck up. Like, stop lying. I was like, no, I'm dead serious. They did not believe me. And then in January 6th, she flew to the studio in London. She was supposed to record on the 7th. And tragically, that she passed away. Yeah, she had actually drowned in the bath. She took a bath and fell asleep. So just super tragic, completely, like just no rhyme, no reason. And now we're stuck with this record where I had already completed the whole thing, and I had re-sang the 2016 to be 2018, and in the anticipation it was going to get on the record. And then I remember Zoe called me and he was like, bro, put on the TV. And the last time he said turn on the TV, Chester Bennington was dead. And I was like, oh no. Like I actually was like to be honest with you, I was like, oh my God, Ivan died. Like I was so afraid to turn the TV on because I was like, oh no. You know, and I turned on the TV and it was Dolores O'Riordan and the Cranberries passes away. I'm like, I just literally got a voice message from her last night. And then it's like, we don't know what to do. Like we have a meeting with so then it was like lawyers and this, that, the other. So that's how the song got cleared, because she wanted to sing on it and everything was like greenlit and it was super exciting. And I'm like, yo, like, you know, and I'm in this surreal place of like, oh, I just sang for Five Finger. I'm like, I'm doing a song with one of my, you know, female vocalists here. It was like my two favorite alternative female singers was Dolores and Fiona Apple. And I was just like, you know, like I cried to this stuff. Like I was like, I'm writing in my, nobody understands me. You know, I was a weird kid. I'm like listening to this sad and then put on gangster rap to try to like, stop being a bitch. You know, like, that's right. We go do some like that. But that's that whole thing, the duality, the masculine and feminine energy. And yeah, and basically the label was like, we have to put this song out. He's like, there's gonna be thousands of these songs flooding the internet in a week. And he's like, this was the one that she wanted and she chose. And I was like, I'm not comfortable. I don't want any money. And they must have thought I was insane. They're like, what? I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm not going to do this for money. So we have to set up a trust fund for her children. And like, you know, all of my publishing proceeds, because I had financed and recorded the song, so I owned 100% of the master. So even the guy Philip, who was my partner in playing on it, he got paid a check and signed away. So 100% of the song was mine, and I donated all of that to her kids. And so they were like, you know, I'm probably sure they were like, this guy's an idiot. Mm-hmm. And again, God, the little voice was like,
do the right thing.
This is the right thing. Yeah. And then the song wound up, you know, it became it was that and Old Town Road were the two most highest selling singles of every genre of music in 2018. It was the most insane thing I'd ever witnessed in my entire life. You know, I go to the grocery store, they're like, hey, you know how it is, like when you get to the place and then you're like, it's kind of scary because you're like, you know. Yeah. I was like, what if I have a booger? You know, my armpits are sweaty. People know who I am now. Weird, you know. And so just weird like that. It was just, and life changed like that. And then within 3 days, we're like, you know, flying to Europe. And just, you know, they're like, hey, will you go to Europe and do a press tour? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, you're going to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and sing at radio stations for about 12 hours a day. I'm like, let's go. So, you know, you know how it is. You do those long flights and they're like, now you're going to get up and like, you're going to go do this and you're going to go talk to these people and you got to sign this and, you know, and it was a lot.
What's the odds that you do this cover song for one of the most iconic songs of all time, and when it's about to happen, the person passes away? Like, what is that's like a 1 in a trillion. It was meant, that song was meant for you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the, you know, it's like, that song had a lot of haunting for multiple reasons. There was a point where like I actually like had some feeling of like I shouldn't be feeling good about all this success because a woman has died. And I carried that for a few months until we flew our kids to New York and we did a sold out show at the Gramercy Theater. And before the show, I got on stage and her two sons and her ex-husband, she has daughters too, but they were underage, so we didn't have them come. And then I handed them a check for $250,000. And the brothers started a business together. The girls, when they turn 18, they have a trust fund. They're set. Like they're good. And so that reconciled that for me. You know what I mean? I was like, and that's the thing. Everything in my life that has been given to me is the result of me not taking what I didn't deserve and not trying to get and not seeking, you know what I mean? And so, it was wild. It was a wild thing. And, it was interesting to see this, the switch right during 2020, right? Because for years it was, then I was named Person of the Year by Rock to Recovery, and then I donated, I think $10,000 to, various rehabs. Then I donated to the police officer who was shot in the Compton shooting, and I gave away $50,000. And during COVID, families who were struggling financially, we had like 5,000 people submit things, and some people were like, "Oh, my neighbor was killed in a car accident. And he just got home from Afghanistan," and then, so we gave all these people money, and so everybody loved me until I wore a MAGA hat, and then it was like I had an ex-girlfriend come out of the woodwork and was like, "Oh, you hit me," and I was like, "Well, no, I didn't." I'm like, "I'm 265 pounds, and I'm like, if I hit you, there would be some sort of evidence about this. Like, I haven't seen you in months. You cheated on me." And that became like a whole thing. Then the media jumped on that. They exploited that. And then it was, anything they could do, they wanted the ex was having financial problems and wanted $100,000 to make it go away. And I beat the whole thing in court. So we went to criminal court. And now the idea is like, there's no evidence here. And then I went to, she was like, she got a restraining order against me. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with you. I was like, you're stalking me. You're the women I date. Like I couldn't post who I was seeing anymore. They were getting harassed. They were getting weird phone calls, hanging up, like just all kinds of crazy. And it went on for 10 months, and then even in court, the judge ruled that there was no evidence of domestic violence, but the media never, because I put myself I put myself on the right side of this massive political divide. No one cared about the truth. It was ideological war. So everything that, I experienced Me Too in real time, right? And I was like, yeah, let's go to court then. And I'm like, so stupid not realizing that it doesn't matter, right? The reason why these things work, like Marilyn Manson's going through this right now, the reason why these things were working is because it's the court. They're basically able to blackmail you because of the court of public opinion. And in that time, because Trump has had so much, he had so many accusations and all this, it became, the Harvey Weinstein. And I think Me Too was like BLM. I think that it was a very valiant cause and that it needed to happen because there was a lot of abuse towards women going on in Hollywood for a very, very long time, and it was completely unchecked. But just like with BLM, the virtue was replaced by an ability to scam people for money. And so I fully experienced that.
So now what do you have going on now going forward? Obviously, I've seen your Pure Blood clothing line and your music. Yeah. Like, tell us what you got coming up.
So what's going on now? I'm about to go on a press tour. So, we survived all these things and we're back on the radio. I put out a song called The War You Wanted at Active Rock Radio in the States about 7 days ago. It's gone up the charts, I think 135 spots already. This week I'm doing a cross-country road trip. I'm heading up Phoenix, El Paso, Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Kansas City. Then I'm going to be at Summer Smash with Andy Frisell and everybody for First Form. I'm doing radio press. I'm doing a whole circle around the country, then coming back, then going to San Diego. Then I'm going to go to Peru, and I'm going to do a spiritual healing, everything. I'm going to take the journey to the next level. And then in September, I'm looking to do a headlining U.S. tour. So, yeah, I'm just going to stay busy.
Tell us about the clothing line.
The clothing line is called Pure Blood. You can figure it out for yourself.
Where can we buy it?
You can buy it at officialpureblood.com.
Okay, so we'll make sure to put that link in the bottom.
So if you felt pressure to do things you didn't want to do and you didn't do them and you stuck by your guns, you're probably a Pure Blood. But we are on YouTube, so we're not going to get into the particulars. But so it's our little club. It's our little we made it.
We need a Pure Blood shirt.
It's the I survived.
That,
it's the I survived the scamdemic.
We've all survived it.
Somewhat. I feel like we're still kind of stuck a little bit, but
I think some people are.
I think the tide's turning. Look, I just saw we saw Korn and Deftones and System of a Down on Saturday. There was 80,000 people. I saw like 3 masks. It's over. So and this is the thing. Some people were like hypochondriacs before COVID even was announced.
Of course, yeah.
So now there's just like, you just are like, oh, when I see someone wearing a mask, I'm like, oh, you have like a condition. It's not like a thing. Nobody wanted to wear them anyway. It was just like it was a lot of pressure. Even though the doctors, Fauci was like, they don't work. And they're like, what happened is that in the beginning when they needed them for the hospitals, they're like, oh, you don't need that. They don't work. And then somebody was like, we could just order millions of these from China and force people to wear them and take their money. They were like, you have to wear a mask. It's just sales. These people are snake oil salesmen. They just have massive platforms to do it, I'm
going to put a mask on the Jay Cutler face back here and promote it.
Nah, we don't have any masks left.
No. You know what I loved about being in Vegas during that time? You'd go to walk in the casino and they'd be like, where's your mask? I'm like, it's in my truck. And they'd be like, okay, have a nice day.
Oh, yeah.
Just walk in. They didn't say nothing.
That was like Orange County. I wound up leaving L.A. Tito Ortiz was like, dude, just come down here. He's like, we don't have COVID here. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I went down to UFC gym. I joined. I found my friend had an Airbnb house that nobody would rent. So I just rented it for like 8 months. I was like, I'll just pay you up front, like 8 months rent. I'm like, can I just stay here? She was like, yeah. She's like, oh, this is great. She gave me a super discount. I was like, wake up, walk to the beach, get my tea. Just hair salons open, everything's normal. I was like, this is political. It's like something's going on here. I was like, all my friends in Florida are outside and everyone in New York's inside.
The only place that I experienced it really bad was Germany and Italy. Like in Italy, you had to have this thing downloaded and show you had to show proof to even walk in a restaurant. Like
well, they did that in New York too.
Did they?
I had to get I went to see my mom for Christmas, and I was like, I had to get a card. I had to call. I had a guy.
I know what you're talking about.
He did a lot of that. He did a lot of professional athletes, not in our industry. Your industry. I like how I just associated myself. I'm like, oh, I'm a bodybuilder too. Like, no, you're not fat ass. Shut up. You're like, with your 18% body fat.
You're a rock star.
Yeah.
What do you think when someone says he's a rock star?
It's weird. It's still weird.
The whole thing is like you're into learning so much now. You've helped so many people, right? And we were talking earlier, and you're like, people's reactions different.
Mm-hmm.
Some people cry. Some people have a really crazy emotions, right?
Yeah.
For me, I get this also. People come up and they get teary-eyed and they tell me about their journey and how they found a place by something I did or an article they read or something I did on social media today that's like life-changing for them. like that's a gift that you were given. And have you accepted that? Because you started this interview and you were like, I haven't made it.
Yeah, no,
but people look at you on a platform of like that level, right? So like when are you going to think differently, or is that ever going to happen? I don't think of myself like that, Tommy. So for me,
I don't think I don't know,
like is there a made it point? Is the journey ever finished? Is the question.
I don't know. No, I guess satisfaction is the death of desire, right? So
you'll never be I was never satisfied. This is arguably the best I ever looked right here. And I still, after this show, said, how can I be better? I was number one.
But that's how you got to number one, right?
Yeah, but I'm still not done. I mean, I'm never satisfied. I never want to stop this journey. I mean, I'm still a bodybuilder at heart, right? I mean, but I give so much more now. I feel like I have so much more to give. So do you think there'll ever be a point of complete success in your life?
I think that, like, what I'm not doing is I'm not chasing the dragon's tail anymore, right? I don't.
You're just rolling with it now?
I don't care to be famous. I don't care about adulation. I think what I have the respect of respectable people, and that's a big deal, right? You know, I go, you know, I was at the festival, and people were like, hey man, like, what's up, bro? Like, yo, I just want to thank you for being the only person that said something, you know? I was like, cool. I'm like, you know, but I'll take it. All right, I'll take that. You know, it's like somebody, you know, I've had times where I had a father and his daughter, they broke into the backstage one night, right? We were on tour, Bad Wolves and Papa Roach. And the stagehand was like, hey, Tommy. He's like, hey, man, he's like, bro, this guy. I'm like, what? What's the matter? He's like, this guy broke in backstage. I was like, what?
So what, right?
I was like, who is he? He's like, he's with his daughter. She tried to commit suicide. I'm like, just take me to them. So I go, I just walked off stage. I'm like drenched, soaking wet. I grab a towel. I'm like, hey, what's up? And, you know, like has her hospital bracelets. He literally went to the hospital and she wanted to see me. And he broke her out of the hospital and he broke in the backstage of the show. And this man was crying because he was like, I cannot save my daughter. Can you please talk to her? And I sat with this girl, with this 13 or 14-year-old little girl. And I just listened. And I hung out with him for like 45 minutes. And it was the most important conversation I was going to have in that entire tour. And I used to smoke crack and live on a mattress. And I don't know who I think I am. That people should come to me and ask me for advice, but somehow God has allowed me to be this person. And I don't deserve it, and I'll never be done trying to live up to it. And I'm not done. I have a lot to learn. You know, and I think everyone is in this place where, like, we have experienced so much hate. It can't be any more, right? It cannot be. We have to reprioritize human life. We have to reprioritize our value. We have to reprioritize our communities. And we have to reprioritize our country. And if everyone does that, we'll be okay. And that's, you know, then I'll rest, right? That'll be like when Thanos snaps his finger and gets rid of half of creation. Well, I'm like, it's the opposite. I'm like, when you know, I'll rest when the battle's over. It's like I want to walk away a lot of times, but I'm like, there's a cultural, spiritual war going on. And there has to be people like us who are going to say, you know, it's like Andy Frisella talks about. He's like, you know, personal excellence is the ultimate act of defiance. In a system that wants to keep everyone homogenous thinking and slave-minded and not living up to their potential and choosing excuses over discipline and the instant gratification over the long haul, there will need to be outliers, and the outliers will become the leaders. And so if that's what I'm here to do, then that's what I'm here to do. And if that's not what I'm here to do, then the universe will let me know too. So I don't know if we'll ever be done. And sorry I got emotional. It's okay to cry.
I'm wrong with it.
Yeah.
Because that probably changed that girl's life, and her dad.
You can only hope.
Yeah.
You know?
Sometimes people just want someone to just spend a little time. You know, that little bit just hearing somebody. You know, that does. I mean, that can be anyone. Sometimes you just want to be heard, and too many people don't want to. They don't want to listen. They want to project what they want instead of just listen. You know?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things. Well, that's one of the hardest things about being in a relationship is like, as a guy, you want to fix things. So when your woman comes to you with a problem, women, that's the other thing too, is like we're in this weird thing where men and women, they've kind of separated everybody, and they're like, women are like, well, you don't need no men, and you know, and men are like, oh, fuck these hoes, and it's like, well, we need women to teach us. We don't, I learned how to listen from a woman, right? I could easily take someone who has problems and be like, you need to do this and you need to do that. That's not how it works. Sometimes, and in therapy, or like, this is why people need mothers and fathers. It's like, because you need the duality. You need both those things. You need to be able to be heard, and then you need the offering of a possible solution that is practical. And, that's men and women need each other. We absolutely do. And like, sure. To continue on thinking that that's not a thing is a false reality. It's not going to, we're all going to end up with cats if we don't fix this nonsense. You know? Cats are okay though. Yeah. I like cats, but it's not the same.
Anything else?
No, man, that was really strong. And, we appreciate you coming on and sharing a little time with us. And
yeah, it was an honor, bro.
Normally we ask, everyone to follow what you do. Okay, so
yeah,
where are people contacting you most these days?
My TikTok's kind of blown up. I'm at Tommy is Vext on TikTok. My Instagram, my third Instagram handle is it's Tommy Vext was right. And then and you can find, I'm on YouTube.
We'll link everything.
Yeah, I'm on Spotify, like streaming. There's I got 20 music videos out. I got 3 albums I put out in the last year. I'm putting out another song Friday. I'm basically releasing a new song every Friday for the rest of my life.
And if you guys like this podcast, go buy one of his shirts.
Yeah, and you'll be on tour now, you said, so make sure some of our listeners, viewers, they'll be able to hear some actual live radio.
Yeah, you can also go. What we're also doing is we're asking people to call into their local radio stations and ask them to play the song. So we're running up the charts. And when I get out of here, we're gonna go to another radio thing and just do the whole dance. Don't follow me on Twitter. I'm about to delete Twitter. Twitter is like the lowest spiritual form of social media. It's like it's neck and neck at the bottom of Instagram. It's like the two lowest. If you want to have a bad day, just go on Twitter.
I don't think I've posted on Twitter since 2015.
I think sometimes my stuff links up to that. But listen, man, we appreciate you coming on. We wish you all the best in the future. I'm really glad we get to catch up. And once again, thanks.
Thank you for having me, bro. Appreciate it.